The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Yo, Philly, how you's doing? Welcome to Philadelphia Baseball, past, present, and personal. I'm Bill Kashatus, your host on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. This week, I'm pleased to have as my guest Larry Bowa, a Philadelphia baseball legend and a member of the Phillies Hall of Fame. Larry was a five-time All-Star shortstop for the Phils between 1970 and 1981, as well as a two-time Gold Glove Award winner and a mainstay of the 1980 World Championship team. He went on to play for the Chicago Cubs, where he mentored Hall of Fame second baseman Ryne Sandberg. After his playing career ended in 1985, Larry managed the San Diego Padres and later the Phillies, winning National League Manager of the Year in 2001. He's also served on the Phillies staff as a third base coach and bench coach, roles he's held with several other organizations, including the Anaheim Angels, Seattle Mariners, New York Yankees, and Los Angeles Dodgers. In addition, Larry has served as a studio analyst for the MLB Network, ESPN's Baseball Tonight, and co-hosted a baseball talk show with Chris Russo on XM Radio. He is currently the senior advisor to Phillies general manager Matt Klentak. Welcome to the podcast, Larry.
Well, thank you, Bill.
Larry, we have a lot of young listeners who I'm sure would be interested to know that you were cut from your high school's baseball team and after playing at Sacramento City College did not make the MLB amateur draft. But Philly scout Eddie Bachman took a chance on you, and it paid off because of your impressive work ethic. In fact, your work ethic was only surpassed by the competitiveness and passion that you brought to the game. Those are qualities that cannot be taught. You either have them or you don't. But those traits can be channeled into a constructive or destructive way. We've seen the latter happen with other former Phillies like Pete Rose and Lenny Dykstra. Who are the individuals who help you channel your work ethic, competitive drive, and passion for the game in a positive way?
Well, I got to think my dad was probably the most influential. He had played professional baseball, got as high as AAA, so I was around the bat and ball for a long time. He instilled the work ethic, never quit, give 100% every time he put the uniform on. And then as I progressed and signed with the Philadelphia Phillies, I'd have to say that Frank Lucchese, who I played for minor league baseball in AAA and AAA, and eventually he was a manager of the Phillies, had a big influence on me. Billy DeMars, who was the hitting coach for the Phillies during my time here, gave me taught me how to learn how to hit, basically. Got over 2,000 hits, and without Billy's help, that wouldn't have happened. And then I had help from guys like Cookie Rojas, Bobby Wine, Tony Taylor. So I've had a few people that have really have left a mark in my life as far as how to approach the game, how to play the game, play it the right way, not make a lot of mental mistakes, and, go out there and give everything you have, 27 outs every time you put a uniform on.
Mm-hmm. Now, Larry, your career really spanned a fascinating period of change in Major League Baseball. It began at the dawn of free agency. It was still a time when a team could develop a core of prospects the younger fans could grow up with and follow for a significant part of their career. I had that opportunity to do that and watch your career really from the beginning. In the 1970s, you were part of a homegrown nucleus that included Mike Schmidt, Greg Luzinski, and Bob Boone. But that was only part of the strategy of building that 1980 World Championship Phillies team. What else did General Manager Paul Owens and Scouting Director Dallas Green do to cultivate that World Championship team?
Well, as you know, we came up short a few years. I mean, we had real good teams, but we kept playing Cincinnati Reds, who were known as the Big Red Machine, and the Dodgers, who had a very good team. So whether it be a pitch we didn't make or a play we didn't make or come up with a big hit, we came up short. And I think the biggest pickup was Pete Rose. They put him in our lineup. Not only physically did he help us, but mentally how to approach the game. He told everybody that when the Reds came in to play us, they didn't like playing us because we were a good team. And maybe we had a little doubts in our mind because we had trouble beating those guys. So I think Pete was a big part of that missing piece that we needed to put us over the hump. But as you said, we came up together the guys that you mentioned, and we won a lot of championships in the minor leagues. So that helped us go through the tough times in the early 70s. We knew we had talent, but we also knew we had to mature a little bit as a team. And when you have that many young guys on the team at one time, it does take a little bit of time to maturate and grow and, do the little things that it takes to win baseball games. But we were very, very, very competitive from about 75 on. And a lot of that was homegrown. A lot of it was the addition of Pete. Of course, as you know, we picked up Steve Carlton in the early 70s. So it was a very good baseball team. There really weren't a lot of flaws on that team in 1980. We could catch it, we could run, we could hit, we could pitch, and we caught the baseball.
Mm-hmm. In fact, probably that 1977 team was the best out of all those years.
Yes. I agree.
Obviously, you had power hitting with Schmidt, Luzinski, starting pitching with Carlton, Ruthven, Christensen. You gave speed along with Lonnie Smith, Bate McBride. You also gave defense, probably one of the best double play combinations really of all time, definitely in Philadelphia history, with you and Manny Trio. But a lot of our younger listeners really don't understand the contribution Pete Rose made to that club. Tell us, what exactly did Pete bring to the table?
Well, the one thing about Pete is when you played against him, you hated him. When he was on your team, you loved him. He gave us that if there was a little doubt in our mind, which after you win the division and get in the playoffs and get beat, obviously some negative thoughts come into your mind. And we started doubting ourselves maybe a little bit, saying that we couldn't compete with those teams in a short series. I think what Pete basically instilled in all of us was the fear factor when his team used to come in and play us. He said we didn't like playing the Philadelphia Phillies. And he also taught us how to grind stuff out. You're not going to be healthy every day. You got to play every day. You got to go out there and post up every day. Don't give away at bats. Don't make foolish mistakes mentally. We're all going to make physical mistakes. So, the overall, it was like the finishing touches on a real good team, and it was something that we needed at that time. And his knowledge of the game, his work ethic was off the charts. And I think a lot of guys that maybe their work ethic, they thought there was a good work ethic, but it really wasn't when you compare it to Pete. They pushed the envelope a little bit farther. So all in all, it was a very good marriage that when Pete came over here.
Now, you were involved in one of the worst trades in Major League Baseball history, and I will have to admit that although as I got older and my writing career evolved, I did have a much better relationship with Bill Giles later than when my writing first started, because I was very critical of the Phillies. And really one of the things that irked me, and I really had a problem with that trade, when essentially it was Giles who traded you to the Chicago Cubs for their shortstop, right, Ivan DeJesus. Right. But Dallas Green, who had become the Cubs general manager, insisted that the Phils throw in a young, at that time, third baseman by the name of Ryan Sandberg as part of that deal. Obviously, the trade paid off handsomely for the Cubs, as your veteran leadership and Sandberg's outstanding all-around play propelled Chicago into the postseason in 1984 for the first time in nearly 40 years. Why did the Phillies make that trade when they still had the nucleus of that 1980 team intact and were positioned for another run at a world championship?
Well, I think there was a misunderstanding. I mean, I was very angry at it. Before Ruly Carpenter sold the team, him and I sat down and talked, and he told me that he was going to sell the team, and he said, but I want to get you under contract, and I want to sign you. And he said, what are you looking for? I said, I'd like to get a 3-year contract. And he goes, it was a verbal thing between Ruly and I that it was a done deal. And we didn't sign anything because Ruly was selling the team. He said there shouldn't be any problem. Bill Giles is going to be one of the owners. As you look back on it, hindsight being 20/20, I should have had it written down in paper, but I trusted Ruly, and I still, to this day, is the best owner I've ever played for. And when he informed Bill that verbally he told me that I was going to get a 3-year contract, and I guess Bill sat down with the people with the new ownership, and he didn't want to give me that. And he said, now that I'm the new owner, maybe a 1 year, maybe a 1 and an option. And of course, that upset me at the time. Then I said, well, you know what? You might as well just trade me then. And because I was at that time, I was a 5-10 guy. And so I had to okay a trade. And once Dallas left, I got a call from Dallas and said, hey, I think I can get you over here. I know you and Bill aren't getting along as far as the contract. He says, what I'll do is I want to try to make a trade, and I will give you a 3-year deal. And so, one thing led to another, and looking back on it, maybe I shouldn't have okayed it, but I did, and it turned out good for me. I went to Chicago, and like you said, we won it the first time in 40 years to get the postseason, but I felt really responsible or having something to do with Sandberg's production, teaching him to play the game the right way, and he was a good kid at that time. I knew he was going to be a good player, but I can't sit here on this podcast and tell you, I knew he was going to be a Hall of Famer. He blossomed into a great player, and as we all know, the rest is history. He is in the Hall of Fame. He was so athletic. The first year he played some center field, third base, second base, and eventually he wound up at second base. And had a very good career with the Chicago Cubs. But that's how that thing sort of unfolded. I sort of pushed the envelope when Bill said he wasn't giving me a 3-year deal. And then I got angry. He got angry. And, like I said, it began as a misunderstanding. And at the end, it just said, well, it's time to move on.
Mm-hmm. It was such a disappointment for me, and I know a lot of other Philly fans, because obviously we had Mike Schmidt. Mike was my favorite player from the time he came in till the time he retired. The Phillies had that talent. Everybody gave Pete Rose the credit as being the catalyst, and he deserved it. But the heart and the soul of the team was always you. And frankly, I thought that the Phillies built around you, really starting in 69, 70. I remember seeing that passion in Connie Mack Stadium when they first brought you up, and you were the constant. You were the heart and the soul of that team, and when you were gone, I really felt that was gone. And in fact, for the first time in my life, I figured, well, I'm going to stop following teams. I'm just going to start following players. So it would be Schmidt on the Phillies, but it was going to be you out in Chicago. So I was very upset, as many fans were, about that trade.
Well, I appreciate that. I was always taught, and Paul Owens told me that in the early 70s, and Dallas was the farm director, and Paul Owens was down there. Paul was the farm director at that time. And basically he said, we're going with a youth movement, and you're going to be a very important part of this. The fact that I came up through the system, I'm sure it had a lot to do with it, but I think that's the one thing the consistency of bringing passion to the game every night and playing hard for 9 innings, and I think eventually that spread through our ball club. We had a lot of characters on those teams that were different personalities, but, that was very flattering that you said that, and I felt like I was a big part of that, but we also had a lot of other guys that contributed, and, like I said, it was a very talented baseball team, and I really believe that I think they broke it up a couple of years too soon. I really do. They traded Bull, they traded me, they traded Booney. I thought we could have won another one, but, I can't sit here and tell you that I'm very disgruntled about what happened. We did win a World Series. It was fun playing with these guys. My heart's always been with the Phillies. I signed there as a young kid. I grew up as a man here. I'm still affiliated with them. And, I've been with other teams. I've been with other organizations, and people say, I've been with real good organizations like the Dodgers and the Yankees. And I try to tell these young kids that this organization in Philadelphia is just as good as any of them. A lot of people think the grass is always greener on the other side, but this organization was great to me, and I have no regrets about anything. Hopefully it can get back to where it was at one time. It's this process that they're going through right now, and it takes a little time, and the maturation of these young kids. The only thing that I have a little bit of skepticism about is, we always think that prospects are going to turn out to be great players. It doesn't work that way, and hopefully that we're not putting all our eggs in one basket saying, well, all these prospects are going to flourish and become great players, because if it was that easy, there would be a whole lot of teams just going on youth movements every year. So, but hopefully the Phillies are headed in the right direction, and they can be a factor in that National League East once again.
Mm-hmm. You entered the managerial ranks after your playing career ended, and you began in 1986 with the Las Vegas Stars,
right.
San Diego Padres AAA team affiliate, and you won the Pacific Coast League championship. The following season, you were promoted to the majors, along with an extremely talented but inexperienced roster, and you lasted just under a season and a half. You returned to the Phillies as manager in 2001, were named Manager of the Year for taking a team that finished last the previous season and almost winning the NL East, finishing just 2 games behind the Atlanta Braves. Now, one of those contributors became Jim Thome. What did Thome bring to the team? That was really the beginning of the kind of rebuilding of the Phillies.
Right. Well, we had a scrappy team, in that 2001 team. I think the biggest thing that I had changed there was the attitude. They almost got comfortable playing good games, and the attitude was, we played good even though we lost. To try to get that stigma out of there was a little bit difficult. And then once we got Thome, we had a guy like Bobby Abreu who swing the bat pretty good in Pearl. But Thome was the kind of guy that every time he stepped to the plate, there was a chance he could hit a 3-run home run and break the game open. He was a presence in the middle of that lineup that helped all the young guys out, took the pressure off the young guys. And I think that with his personality and the way he approached the game, it helped me in the transition of trying to get these guys thinking about winning type baseball. But he was a great guy to be around. He was a tremendous, big offensive player in the middle of our lineup. And when I had him at first base, he never was a Gold Glover, but he didn't embarrass you there. He worked hard. He had great leadership skills. Guys always talked to him about hitting and everything. But he was probably the big centerpiece to us moving forward as an organization. To have that presence in the middle of the lineup was something. And a blue-collar type player. He was one of those guys that got to the park early and left late, and had a very good idea about how to approach opposing pitchers every single night. A lot of young guys would go up and say, what do you think this guy's going to do to me at the plate? What's his best pitch? And Jim was very prepared in that manner.
Despite your success in leading the team, the Phillies, to winning records in 2001, 2003, and 2004, you were let go. Some of the sports writers claim that you lacked the patience to coach younger players. Other sports writers said that your aggressive, highly competitive style wore on the players. Do you think there's any truth to either of those assessments?
Well, it all depends on who you talk to, I guess. As far as being able to deal with young kids, I've been very successful that way. Here in Philly, I had Cesar Hernandez and Freddie Galvis. I had Robinson Cano in New York. I would say that was one of my strengths is working with young kids. The part about being aggressive in that, it all depends on who the player is, I guess. Some guys liked it and some guys didn't like it. I thought at that time that the reasoning wasn't justified, but, everybody has different opinions of why certain moves are made. And it felt at that time that was the best way to go. But the part about not being able to deal with young kids is totally false. In fact, that's what I love doing is working with younger players.
Mm-hmm. In fact, I think, that time in Philadelphia and then your return as a bench coach,
right.
I think that is, whether you realize or not, that has made you beloved in that organization, and I'm sure in other organizations that you've been in as well. because I hear nothing but the greatest compliments about you from former players in the Phillies organization, the years you managed, the years you were bench coach, and that's hard to become a beloved athlete in any pro sport in the city of Philadelphia. That's almost impossible. So it's well deserved. It's really well deserved.
Well, I've always been taught that when you're not the manager, that loyalty plays a big part in helping the manager at that particular time. And I was very fortunate to be a coach for Lou Piniella and Joe Torre, who I consider Joe Torre probably one of the greatest guys I've ever been around. And I think the loyalty factor comes into play when players know that they can't go behind the manager's back and go to a coach and say, God, I wonder why he pinched it for me, because they knew that if they came to me, that my comment would be, go in there and talk to the manager, because he has a reason for every move that he makes. And I think that reputation has sort of followed me everywhere I've gone, that whoever you work for, that I'm going to be a loyal coach, and I'm going to work hard. And I think that part of my reputation was constantly following me, that he's going to give you everything he has. And when I was coaching third, I consider that to be one of the positions that was very important on the team, and I did that for a long period of time. And as a bench coach, you take that and you try to keep the manager on his toes as far as, because when you're a manager, you worry about the pitching mostly. He doesn't worry about who's coming up, what the score is, what inning it is, how many pitches the pitcher has. I was well prepared and all of that stuff. So, it was through a lot of hard work and everything. And, like my dad always said, if you outwork everybody, there's a good chance you're going to be successful. And that was my motto, basically, when I played, when I coached, when I managed. And to this day, I still feel that way, if you have a job to do the best you can and give 100% and see what happens.
All right, I want to turn very briefly to what's going on in Major League Baseball today, and I think one of the best models for that is the Chicago Cubs. They've shown that it takes a very different strategy in order to build a championship team. Their formula is a mix of traditional and modern techniques, including the assessment of prospects through sabermetrics, as well as scouting, developing the farm system, as well as free agent acquisitions and management that is well-versed in all of those areas. The Phillies seem to operate at extremes. For the longest time, the evaluative emphasis was on scouting. But now, with the hiring of Gabe Kapler, the organization seems committed to analytics. Clearly, from what I've seen and heard of Gabe Kapler, he's articulate, he's bright, very conversant in analytics. But he only has 1 year of minor league managing experience under his belt and a journeyman playing career. What is he going to have to do to be successful in Philadelphia?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is, you hit it right on the head with the Cubs. It's a combination of everything. It's not just one thing. It seems like today in baseball, the analytics are basically taking over. I like certain parts of the analytics, and there's also things that I don't like about analytics. But I do believe that in my own mind that you don't just throw things into a computer and say this is going to be our lineup because of the analytics. An element comes into play. The one thing that the analytics don't measure is your brain and your heart. And you're a smart player and you play with a lot of heart to overcome some of the flaws you have maybe in the analytical part. If I was playing now, I probably would have never signed because it's all analytics, and I didn't really analytic. My numbers would not have been something where a team would have said, "Oh, let's go get this guy." And again, it seems like it's a trend right now, but as you said, the Cubs seem to do it in all phases, whether it's free agency, scouting, analytics, young kids, putting them in the lineup. It is a combination of things. I definitely don't think you can be successful if you just use analytics the whole way. I think you got to use everything. The eye test comes into play a lot. And I think when you get that right combination and you get the right players to be able to do that, then you're going to have a good baseball team. But to do it one way, I don't think it's not going to work for a lot of teams. I think you need the right combo.
Mm-hmm. The other thing we're seeing in the MLB today is the Latin Americanization of the game. We have players from the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Puerto Rico, and even Cuba. They compose nearly one-third of the rosters in both minor and Major League Baseball. And many clubs, including the Phillies, have established baseball academies in those same countries to recruit players after a period of time where they abandoned the Latin American market. One of the reasons for this is because Latinos are extremely talented because they play year-round. Club owners and general managers also know that Latinos are inexpensive to sign compared to American ball players. At the same time, there's a concern that individual performance is more important to those players than team performance, and that it will send the wrong message to amateur athletes who aspire to a pro career. Is that a legitimate concern?
Well, I think you get that not only with Latino players, you get that with the American players too. I know a lot of Latino players that are very team-oriented, and I also know a few that are very selfish. So I don't think you could take that, I should say, the Latino players play for themselves. Because I've coached some, played with some, and it depends on the mindset. I've played with a lot of them that are very team-oriented. And the reason I think that teams are going after the Latino players is, like you hit it right on the head, is they start playing baseball at 7 or 8 years old. So their instincts are off the charts. Whereas, the kids in the States here now, they play different sports. They have all the video games they play, and a lot of them don't start playing baseball when they're in high school. So there's going to be an attraction for the Latin players. There's no question about that, because of the fact that they do play every day, and they have a pretty good feel of how to play the game of baseball. But as far as being selfish or not, you have that whether you're a Latin player, whether you're an American player, whether you're an African-American player. There's certain guys that just play that way, and there's other guys that play the game as a team sport. And when you get those guys to play this game as a team sport, then you have a pretty good nucleus as a team.
Mm-hmm. Last couple questions. Let's look at you and your future. You're now senior advisor to Phillies general manager Matt Klentak. What
right.
are your responsibilities in that capacity now?
Well, I'm going to spring training with the big club, and just basically do what they want me to do. And then once the season starts, they want me to go work with the young infielders at Reading, Lehigh Valley, and Clearwater. So I'll be making trips to the minor league system as well as watching our big league team play. Depends where we are in the draft. If they're thinking about drafting an infielder, they probably want me to go out and go to the college that they're looking at a kid and give my evaluation on him and give my opinion of him. Basically, Matt's going to basically tell me what he wants me to do. But I'm going to do a bunch of stuff, and hopefully it'll be different for me. But it also, knowing that I'm working with the young kids, that should be good for me, because like I said before in the interview earlier, I like working with the young guys.
Mm-hmm. Last question. You're California, born and bred. You've gone back there to coach in the Los Angeles area, and yet you still make your home in Philadelphia. You're one of the very few Philadelphia athletes, and specifically Phillies, who make their home in Philadelphia. You said earlier in the interview that, you talked about your loyalty to Philadelphia, but what is it about Philadelphia, the city and the fans, that have endeared us to you?
Well, I just associate myself with the city because it is a blue-collar city. And they embraced me when I came here as a player that, let's face it, there were a lot of question marks when I came up here. A lot of people didn't know if I was going to play in the big league. The fact that they appreciated the way that I played, the work ethic, and I just sort of really stayed here. I mean, my first year was in '70, and I never left. I still go back to California. I have relatives out there to visit, but I consider this my home, and this is where everything's basically happened for me. And I built up a good reputation in the city, and I like being here. I like the way that the fans they're very enthusiastic, whether it's baseball, football, hockey, basketball. I like watching that. When they get behind you, they also let you know if you're not playing good, which I have no problem with. They let you know if they don't think you're giving you a good effort, which I have no problem with. And I try to tell these guys, if you play hard for this city and you come out every night and give everything you have, you don't have any problem at all with the fans. And that's basically how my career sort of evolved and me staying here.
Larry, you said that you don't know if you would have made it in this age of analytics, but I can tell you one thing. I've written about Philadelphia baseball, and I'm talking the old Athletics as well as the Phillies, for 25 years. You would have fit perfectly into any of those teams in any of those other time periods because of your passion for the game, your work ethic, which has always been phenomenal, and the person you are. And as I said, I really do believe that you were the heart and soul of that 1980 championship team, and that you are now beloved, and it is well-deserved. I wish you nothing but the best of luck as you move on to the front office. And thanks for being with us on the podcast.
All right, Bill. I had a great time, and hopefully I'll run into you along the way somewhere.
You got it. And thank you, Philly fans, for tuning in. See you next week for another podcast of Philadelphia baseball, past, present, and personal. This is Bill Kashatus, rounding third and heading home on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network.